You drop a burlap sack stuffed with straw from a plane at midnight, strap a parachute to it, add a timed explosive, make it look like a man falling through darkness. 500 of these things rain down across Normandy on June 6, 1944. They pull entire German divisions away from the real invasion. The 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend races to Lisieux chasing ghosts. The 915 Grenadier Regiment abandons Omaha Beach for dummy drops south of the landing zones. Operation Titanic works. The dummies burn on impact. Mission complete. But what happens to the ones that don't explode? Where do they go when the war ends? Who finds them? And why does a burlap doll that fooled the Wehrmacht now sell for thousands at auction, while most vanished completely? 4 RAF squadrons lift off from English airfields. Numbers 90, 138, 149, and 161. Flying Handley Page Halifaxes, Short Stirlings, and Lockheed Hudsons, 40 aircraft total. They carry approximately 450 paradummies, officially designated Device Camouflage Number 15. British troops call them Ruperts, Americans call them Oscars. Each one stands 85 centimeters tall, just under 3 feet, made of Hessian cloth, what Americans call burlap. Drawstrings at the head, wrists, and ankles allow them to be filled with sand, straw, or sawdust. 4 flaps with brass grommets on the torso hold the parachute pack. Weight matters. These things need to fall like men. Douglas Fairbanks Jr. introduces the self-destruct concept, a timed explosive that burns the dummy on landing, erasing evidence and simulating a paratrooper destroying his chute. Behind each parachute, a device called a pintail, rifle fire simulator, cracking sounds in the dark. Some dummies carry 30-minute recordings of battle noise, mortar fire, men shouting, boots on ground. You hear it from a distance and you think airborne assault. North of the Seine, Titanic 2, cancelled, too much air traffic. Titanic 3, 50 dummies near Malteau, and woods north of Baron-sur-Odon, southwest of Caen. Titanic 4, 200 dummies near Marigny in the Manche. Each drop zone positioned miles from actual Allied airborne landings. The real drops, 82nd and 101st Airborne, British 6th Airborne, happen elsewhere. The paradummies are the diversion. Their job, amplify the deception, play recordings, fire weapons, let some Germans escape to spread word of the invasion. 11 SAS soldiers die in the operation, or face execution by Germans later. The RAF loses 2 aircraft and crews. If you value documented military deception history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also, comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from auction records at Bonhams, dated July 2016, analyzing provenance chains, back to 1944 Normandy drops, and from declassified RAF operational records held at the Air Force Museum of New Zealand detailing the early 1980s RAF Lanham discovery of 12 unused Ruperts in original crates, published October 24, 2021. Now back to the information. At 0200 hours, June 6th, Wehrmacht units report parachutist landings east of Caen and in Coutances, Valognes, and Saint-Lô areas. Ship's engines at sea. General Hans Speidel decreases alert level when reports come back. Just dummies. But the damage is done. Generalfeldmarschall Gerd von Rundstedt already ordered the 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend to Lisieux. A Kampfgruppe from the 915 Grenadier Regiment, 352nd Infantry Division Reserve, diverts from Omaha and Gold Beaches. Away from the 101st Airborne drop zones, they chase exploding burlap. White fabric in the pre-dawn light. But explosives fail. Not every charge detonates properly. Some dummies land intact. Some land in trees. Some fall into fields where the timer malfunctions. These are the survivors. French civilians collect white and colored parachutes from real drops. They make wedding dresses, shirts, undergarments. Archives show at least one documented case, a French wedding dress made from an American Reserve parachute, now displayed at what was the International Museum of World War II in Natick, Massachusetts, before its 2019 closure. But the Ruperts themselves, less desirable, burlap has value. Farmers could use it. The problem, unexploded charges. You find a dummy in your field, you don't know if that explosive is live. Touch it wrong and it detonates hours, days, weeks later. French civilians avoid them. The dummies stay where they land. After liberation, unexploded ordnance teams sweep France. The scale is massive. 1 ton of explosives fired for every square meter at Verdun in World War I. An estimated 1.5 billion shells on the Western Front, that war alone. World War II adds layers. By 1946, French Département de Déminage teams are pulling 900 tons of unexploded munitions per year from French soil. They still do. Since 1946, 630 French ordnance disposal workers have died handling this material. 2 die at Vimy as recently as 1998. Belgian teams suffer 20 deaths since 1919. Around Ypres alone, 260 deaths and 535 injuries from unexploded World War I and II munitions. This is the world the paradummies land in. Some French farmers recognize the dummies for what they are, Allied deception devices. No immediate threat if the charge failed to detonate. A few take them, store them in barns, sheds, attics. One dummy discovered in Branville, northeast of Caen, decades later, bought by a French collector. Eventually sold. That specific dummy, authenticated as a genuine Operation Titanic artifact, auctioned by Bonham's auction house, height 820 millimeters, width 400 millimeters, Hessian cloth, original tie strings at head, sleeves, feet, original parachute and pack on back. Later, tie string on the parachute, slightly dusty. An estimate of surviving field-dropped examples from June 6, 1944, probably under 30 worldwide. The ones that didn't, either destroyed by ordnance teams during post-war sweeps, or they rot. Hessian cloth degrades. 60 years of French weather, 80 years now. Rain, sun, soil. Straw filling decomposes. The burlap breaks down, sand spills. By 1950, most paradummies that survive the initial drops are unrecognizable. Fragments and field edges, anonymous agricultural finds mixed with other war debris. The airfield from which some of the June 5th departures launched, decades pass. Early 1980s, someone checks a storage building. Inside, a wooden crate, unopened, contents, 12 Ruperts, unused, never deployed, mint condition, parachutes neatly folded, Hessian intact. Printed markings on the fabric, possibly from salvaged sacks. These are production overruns or operational spares that never left England. One goes to the Air Force Museum of New Zealand. They published details in October 2021. The Rupert, hollow Hessian head, arms, legs, small-timed explosives fitted inside to destroy the dummy and simulate a soldier burning his parachute, pintail noisemaker attached behind the parachute. It never faced Germans in battle, never dropped over France. It sat in an English airfield for nearly 40 years. In June 1994, 50 years after D-Day, the 50th anniversary celebrations in Normandy attract dealers and collectors. Someone brings unused dummies from the English airfield find to Cabourg, Normandy. Street market. 12 dummies, 2 sell to French buyers. The remaining 10, purchased by Ken Rendell, director of the Museum of World War II in Natick, Massachusetts. Rendell distributes 8 to World War II museums globally. Authentication matters. Provenance chains get documented. These aren't field-recovered dummies, they're warehouse finds. Clean examples that show what the devices looked like before deployment. But they follow the same pattern. Production surplus, stored and forgotten. Rediscovered during base closures or building demolitions as Cold War-era military sites get decommissioned. They display an original that probably never saw operational use. The National World War II Museum in New Orleans, they have one. Merville Bunker Museum in France, multiple Ruperts on display, including dioramas showing Germans discovering them. Caen Memorial Museum, Omaha Beach Memorial. The International Spy Museum in Washington displays one. Before its 2019 closure, the International Museum of World War II in Natick held examples from the Rendell distribution. 2017, 1 Rupert sells for £2,500 at UK auction. 2021, a milestone auction sale lists a Rupert purchased from a French collector in Branville. Description notes it likely landed but didn't explode, tucked away by a local farmer after D-Day. The auction listing includes a correction. Further research indicates this particular paradummy is one from the crate of 12 found at an RAF airfield in England in the early 1990s, sold at the Cabourg Street Market in June 1994, the 50-year anniversary. Provenance chains matter, field recovered or warehouse stock. The distinction affects value and historical interpretation. How it got from Normandy to England, unknown. Her grandfather, possibly a veteran who brought it back as a souvenir, or someone who acquired it post-war. That dummy sells for £900 through Buckinghamshire auctioneers Marlowe's. Kevin King from the auction house tells the Mirror newspaper, quite rare to come across previously unknown paradummies now. Back in the 1970s, a whole batch found on an airfield, and some are in museums now. 1962, The Longest Day, Daryl F. Zanuck production. The movie depicts Operation Titanic. Germans in the film call the dummies Gummipuppen. Rubber dolls are dummy dolls. The film paradummies, much more elaborate than the real ones. Made of rubber, full-sized, detailed faces. These are props, not replicas. They work for cinema. One survives in the Airborne Museum at Sainte-Mère-Église. Another sold at auction through Prop Store in November 2021, Lot 232. Rubber construction, carefully restored, metal armatures added, custom base. It's a film artifact about a real device, not the device itself. Completed March 1944. Friedman called his experimental model White Knight. it evolved into the Navy PD Paratroop decoy pack, rubber dummy, inflation equipment, demolition outfit. Thrown from aircraft, it inflates, activates a delay fuse. Drops at 15 to 20 feet per second from 700 feet. Produces simulated automatic rifle fire. Self-destructs 3 minutes after hitting ground. 6 aircraft drop 600 Navy PD pack dummies north and west of Toulon at 0205 hours. False drop zones. German radio reports confirm complete success. The rifle simulators and battle noise effects function well. Axis Sally, German radio propagandist, later refers to the decoys as the product of a fiendish Anglo-Saxon mind. Post-war, the U.S. Army continues paradummy development. March 1946, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Combined engineering tests, 3-foot, 4-foot, and 6-foot models compared, single units and mass drops, observations at close range and up to 1 mile distance. Conclusion: 4-foot dummy presents satisfactory simulation under controlled conditions. They used these into the 1970s. Later models, windsock-type simulators, plastic film figures, cheaper than rubber, inflation by air passage during descent, 4-foot high decoys with 12-foot diameter parachutes. First models used parachutes made from salvaged Army sheets. He recalls, a final stroke of ingenuity, characteristic of our thorough preparation, was the plan to drop by parachute several groups of uniformed dummies behind the Albert Canal to the west. As we had guessed, this caused considerable confusion to the Belgian command. December 1944, Ardennes offensive. Hitler orders 300 dummy figures loaded for drops north of Camp Elsenburg to confuse Americans. The airborne operations fail overall. The deception effort, most successful feature of the entire plan. But the D-Day Ruperts remain the most documented case. 450 deployed. 12 men jump with them. 11 die. 2 RAF aircraft lost. German divisions diverted. Allied forces gain hours of reduced opposition. By the time Wehrmacht command realizes the scale of dummy deployment, real paratroopers have secured bridges and roads. Dawn breaks, and the amphibious assault begins. If you value documented military history covering the small details that changed battles, subscribe. One-click supports continued research into forgotten stories like this. Also comment which museum you'd most want to see a Rupert displayed at. In Normandy today, metal detectorists still find war material, bullets, shell fragments, equipment buckles, buttons. The Iron Harvest, annual collection of unexploded ordnance by Belgian and French farmers after plowing. It's ongoing. 2019, Dovo, Belgian demining unit, diffuses more than 200 tons of ammunition. Every spring planting and autumn plowing brings up more. German and Allied shells fired during World War I and II work their way to the surface through soil movement and natural processes. Farmers place them at field boundaries or collection points. Authorities collect them, controlled detonation at specialist centers. Metal components, the brass grommets, perhaps pieces of the pintail mechanism, might surface, but identifiable paradummy remains unlikely. The documented survivors come from storage, not fields. Made from canvas instead of burlap for durability, proper flaps on head, hands, feet, contrasting bias tape, reinforced grommets. The 82nd Airborne Museum measured and photographed an original in their collection, so reproductions could be authentic. They ship unstuffed. Reenactors fill them with polyfill instead of straw. These aren't artifacts. They're educational tools and props for living history demonstrations. Estimate, fewer than 30 authentic field-deployed examples survive worldwide. Add the warehouse finds from RAF Lynham and other airfields, perhaps 50 to 75 more. Total surviving population, under 100 Ruperts from all production runs, thousands made. Less than 1% remain. Nobody collected paradummies as souvenirs the way they collected helmets, insignia, weapons. A 3-foot burlap sack with unknown explosive potential, not valuable enough to risk, not significant enough to preserve. Until decades later, when military historians and collectors realized what they represented, tactical deception at industrial scale, psychological warfare deployed through hundreds of simultaneous drops. A few $1,000s in materials pulling entire armored divisions away from the largest amphibious invasion in history. Age 10. A customer pays with an 1806 $half. Ken sells it to a coin dealer for $3.50. Later, he discovers letters and manuscripts. Coins are cold compared to a letter where you get the sense of a person. He builds a career as a dealer in historical documents. In 1983, Newsweek and Stern magazines hire him to expose the fake Hitler diaries. He writes 8 books, collects 50,000 World War II artifacts over decades. In 1999, opens the Museum of World War II in Natick. 2016, renamed International Museum of World War II to reflect global scope. These objects tell the human story interwoven with military and political events through artifacts that made up life from every day to the most momentous decisions during the war. A Rupert represents the planners who conceived Operation Titanic, David Strangeways, head of Tactical Deception Unit for 21st Army Group. It represents the RAF crews flying 40 aircraft into hostile airspace, the SAS men who jumped, knowing they might never link up with Allied forces, the German commanders receiving reports of parachute drops and making split-second decisions about troop deployment, the French civilians who found the dummies in fields and chose to avoid them, the English airfield workers who stored unused examples in crates that sat undisturbed for 40 years. March 2018, Rendell sells his core collection to Ronald Lauder for $25 million, billionaire art collector, heir to Estée Lauder Cosmetics empire. The deal includes thousands of artifacts: Sherman tank, Higgins landing boat, Hitler's uniform, Hitler's mustache trimmer. Contract calls for secrecy. Lauder signs agreement to lease the collection back to the museum through end of 2019. Provision allows either party to exit with 30 days' notice. June 2019. Plans revealed to relocate the collection to Washington, D.C. eventually. September 1st, 2019, International Museum of World War II in Natick closes abruptly. Moving trucks arrive. 20 years of operation end. 4,000 students visited in 2018 alone. 40% subsidized by the museum. 1,000 students on the waitlist. School field trips canceled. The specific paradummies that Ken Rendell distributed to museums worldwide in the 1990s, those remain in their locations. The Air Force Museum of New Zealand Rupert, still displayed. Portsmouth D-Day story, still there. Merville Bunker Museum, unchanged. But the broader collection, scattered or consolidated under new ownership. Items move again. The paradummy survival story isn't just about June 6th, 1944. It's about the 80 years after. Who keeps these things? Who documents them? Who decides they matter? Current auction estimates for authenticated Ruperts, £2,000 to £5,000 depending on condition and provenance. Field recovered examples command higher prices than warehouse finds if documentation proves they deployed on D-Day. Original parachute attached, premium. Original stuffing intact, rarer still. Most survivors lack stuffing. The drawstrings at head, wrists, ankles opened decades ago. Sand or straw removed to prevent deterioration and facilitate storage. Acquired by veterans, passed through families. Displayed in private home collections. Some owners don't know what they have, think it's a training dummy or film prop. Without provenance documentation, authentication becomes difficult. The RAF Lenham find created a known population with traceable history. The Cabra Street Market sale in '94, documented. But paradummies that moved through informal channels in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, provenance chains break, lost to history. The National World War II Museum in New Orleans holds a Rupert. Museum founded 2000 as National D-Day Museum. Congress designated it America's official National Diduito II Museum in 2003. 7-acre campus, 7 pavilions. 406,251 visitors in 2010. Nearly 700,000 in fiscal year 2016. The Rupert there, displayed as part of broader D-Day exhibits, context provided, Operation Titanic explained, tactical deception described. Visitors see the dummy and understand the scale of planning required for Overlord. Every detail mattered, even burlap sacks. Operation Fortitude convinced Germans the invasion would target Pas-de-Calais, 150 miles up the coast from Normandy. Fortitude North suggested attack on Norway. Fortitude South created fictitious 1st United States Army Group under Patton's command, positioned for Calais assault. Inflatable Sherman tanks, fake radio traffic, double agents feeding disinformation. The Germans kept divisions at Calais even after Normandy landings. They believed the larger second invasion still coming. Operations Taxable and Glimmer. RAF dropped metal strips called Window to confuse German radar. Appeared as massive fleet on screens. Operation Titanic, the paradummies. All these efforts coordinated. The result? German high command uncertain about Allied intentions, even as troops stormed beaches. Uncertainty bought time. Time saved lives. What survives exists in institutions dedicated to preserving evidence of the war. Not the glory, not just the outcomes, the mechanisms, the tools, the deceptions, the human decisions embedded in material objects. A paradummy found in Branville is one farmer's choice. Take this from the field, store it in the barn, keep it for decades. His decision to not destroy it. His family's decision to sell it to a collector. That collector's decision to sell to the museum or auction house. Each choice preserves or erases physical evidence. Cold War buildups and drawdowns, finally discovered during a storage audit or building clearance. 12 Ruperts that never saw combat, telling a story about military logistics and the massive scale of Operation Overlord preparation. They produced hundreds, maybe thousands of these devices for one night's operation, 40 aircraft carrying them, 12 SAS men jumping with them, all for hours of German confusion. How many Allied lives saved because the 915 Grenadier Regiment wasn't at Omaha Beach in full strength at H hour? How many casualties avoided because the 12th SS Panzer didn't immediately counterattack Sword Beach? Intelligence assessments exist, after-action reports. But you can't count lives not lost. You can count divisions diverted. You can time German response delays. You can document the tactical success, the human cost savings, estimates, and probabilities. Students who study World War II and discover that warfare involves as much deception as firepower. Researchers who examine paradummies and understand industrial-scale psychological operations. The objects teach by existing, not through narrative alone. The physical presence, 85 centimeters of burlap with brass grommets and drawstrings, conveys information that text cannot. This is what they used, this simple, this crude, this effective. Cyber operations, decoy communications. But the principle remains. Make the enemy see what isn't there, move them away from what is. The Rupert is an ancestor. Analog, mechanical, fundamentally simple. Fill a bag, strap a chute, add an explosive, drop it from a plane. Repeat 450 times in coordinated fashion across multiple drop zones with precise timing and human teams to amplify the effect. They heard reports of parachute drops. They deployed forces to investigate and contain. By the time they confirmed the drops were dummies, Allied airborne forces had completed primary objectives elsewhere. Pegasus Bridge secured, batteries silenced, causeways blocked. The deception didn't need to last long, just long enough. The ones that remain exist because they failed to deploy, failed to explode, failed to be found and destroyed. Failure created survival. Survival created museum exhibits. Museum exhibits created education. Education creates understanding of how battles are won before the first shot fired. Through intelligence, through planning, through deception, through burlap and straw. It will outlast anyone who remembers June 6, 1944. It will outlast everyone who built it, packed it, flew it to an airfield, stored it, forgot it, rediscovered it. The object persists. Information embedded in material form. Device camouflage number 15, 3 feet of history. Evidence that warfare changes faster than we remember. Evidence that simple solutions scale to strategic impact. Evidence that most of what happened leaves no trace except in archives and museums and the objects some people chose to keep. RAF Linham closed as an active station in 2011, sold for redevelopment. The buildings where the crate sat for 40 years, demolished or repurposed. No marker notes that 12 paradummies waited there in darkness while the Cold War passed, while Vietnam happened, while the Berlin Wall rose and fell, while the Soviet Union collapsed, while the internet emerged. 12 burlap forms in a wooden box, irrelevant to everything occurring around them until someone opened that box and recognized what they were. Before authentication, a Rupert is a curiosity, possibly a training aid, possibly a film prop. After authentication with provenance documentation connecting it to specific airfields, specific operations, specific dates, it becomes historical artifact. The transformation happens through research. Archive documents, RAF operational records, auction catalogs, museum accession logs, oral histories from veterans who prepared the devices or flew the missions. Each piece of evidence builds the chain-linking object to event. The grandfather's shed. Rupert, how did it cross the channel? No record. The Branville farmer's Rupert. How did it survive 80 years in French climate? Unknown. The gaps in provenance don't erase significance, but they complicate interpretation. Is this a genuine D-Day device or a post-war reproduction? Is it from the Normandy drops or from operations in southern France? Without documentation, conclusions become tentative. Some documentation, some gaps. They balance educational value against scholarly integrity. Display an object with uncertain provenance and educate thousands, but risk showing a reproduction as authentic. Reject it and lose educational opportunity, but maintain strict standards. The decisions shape what future generations see and understand about the past. These have been studied, photographed, measured, their construction documented, they serve as reference points. When a new Rupert surfaces at auction, it's compared against the museum examples. Hessian weave, grommet placement, drawstring configuration, parachute pack design. The comparison confirms or questions authenticity. But in private sales, distinctions blur. The buyer needs expertise or documentation to verify authenticity. Auction houses provide what provenance they can. Bonhams, heritage auctions, milestone auctions. They research items, publish findings, note gaps. The market determines value, but institutions determine historical significance. Most D-Day documentaries focus on beaches and airborne drops, mentioning deception only in passing. The paradummies exist on the margins of popular memory, among historians and collectors, recognized as significant, among general public, mostly unknown. Until someone visits a museum and sees the Rupert behind glass and reads the label and realizes this simple object changed outcomes. A handful reached museums. Fewer than 100 survive worldwide from thousands produced. They moved from tactical devices to historical artifacts, from active service to passive display, from classified deception equipment to public education tools. The transformation required time, recognition, preservation, documentation. One to New Zealand, one to Portsmouth, others to private collectors. They travel farther after the war than during it, from England to New Zealand, from Normandy to Massachusetts, to locations unknown when the Natick Museum closes. Movement continues. Objects rarely rest. A Rupert at auction draws bids from collectors worldwide. Someone in California, someone in Germany, someone in Japan. They bid against each other for a piece of June 6, 1944. The winner pays thousands of pounds for 3 feet of burlap and memories they don't have. The object represents something larger than itself, represents ingenuity under pressure, represents the thousands of details that make operations succeed, represents the soldiers who didn't die because a division chased ghosts instead of defending a beach. Not just the physical object, the meaning embedded in it. A Rupert in a museum vitrine tells visitors that war is complexity, that victory requires more than courage. The battles are won in planning rooms with maps and intelligence assessments and creative thinking about how to deceive an enemy who expects deception. The paradummy is evidence of that thinking. Physical proof that someone sat in a room in 1943 and said, "What if we drop hundreds of fake paratroopers to pull forces away from real drops?" And someone else said, "How do we make that work?" And engineers built prototypes, and tests happened, and production scaled. And operational plans integrated the concept, and aircrews trained, and SAS teams briefed. And on June 5th, 40 aircraft took off carrying something that never existed before to support an operation larger than anything attempted before. Maybe this year, maybe next. Someone cleaning out an estate finds a burlap form in an attic, doesn't know what it is, calls an appraiser. The appraiser recognizes it or doesn't. If they do, authentication begins. Documentation searched, provenance established if possible. Museum contacted or auction arranged, another Rupert surfaces, another piece of Operation Titanic preserved. If they don't recognize it, thrown away. Lost. The cycle continues. Discoveries and losses, preservation and destruction. 80 years later, what happened to the dummy paratroopers after World War II is still happening. Objects still move between owners. Museums still acquire new examples when they surface. Researchers still document findings. Auction records still note sales. The story isn't finished. It won't finish while memory of June 6th exists and while people value physical connections to that day. While someone looks at a Rupert and understands this simple thing, helped win a war. Not the parachute. The knowledge that warfare operates on multiple levels simultaneously. Physical combat and psychological operation, direct assault and tactical deception, real paratroopers and fake ones, all coordinated, all timed, all contributing to outcome. The paradummies that remain teach that lesson. They persist as evidence that wars are won by thinking as much as fighting, by preparation as much as execution, by hundreds of small deceptions creating one large success. In Normandy fields, 80 years of plowing have turned earth that paradummies landed on thousands of times. The crops grow, the farms operate, tourists visit beaches and cemeteries. Some know Operation Titanic happened, most don't. The story lives in museums and archives and collectors' homes and auction catalogs. It lives in the minds of historians who study the campaign. It lives in documentaries that cover deception operations. It lives in the objects that survived when most didn't. The ones that burned fulfilled their purpose and vanished. The ones that didn't burn mostly vanished anyway through time and exposure and deliberate destruction by ordnance teams. The tiny fraction that survived, preserved by accident, intention, luck, found by collectors, veterans, farmers, archivists, documented by museums, auction houses, researchers, displayed for education, sold for profit, kept for memory. The story of the paradummies after World War II is the story of how we choose what to remember and what to forget, what to preserve and what to let decay, what matters enough to save and what doesn't. 450 burlap sacks changed history for a few hours on June 6, 1944. Fewer than 100 remain to prove it happened.